You're welcome. First time. What a long journey. Santa Barbara's beautiful, isn't it?
Welcome.
And the last time I talked here was November 4th, 2018. That was when you were still in the McVeigh house, just down the road here. And it was a big milestone. After the talk, I was driving home and I got a message from a fellow sitter, actually Ryujin, who's now down at the Zen Center, Los Angeles, but he was with us in San Luis Obispo before that. And the message was just brief. It said, "My condolences for the loss, for your loss." I said, "What the hell was that?" And got home and found out Bernie Glassman had died that day. And the talk was peppered with, things about Roshi Bernie and many of the things that he's done in his life. And it's also a joy to be here with Dharma-Joy. We've been practicing together for a quarter of a century. He got to ZCLA just a little bit before me. It feels like it. And so we've been involved with this experiment of shared stewardship for that amount of time when Roshi Gyoku first started it. So today, what I wanted to do, or what we want to do, is Sensei Dharma-Joy will talk about history, about how this has kind of been started and how it's been evolving. And then together we'll talk about some of the components of shared stewardship, exactly what that means. And he'll be able to give insights to a much larger organization at ZCLA. I don't know how many members we have there now. I'll get there. Oh, okay. Okay. And then I will give a more of a perspective on a smaller Sangha, because the Sangha in San Luis Obispo is about this size. It's about the same size as Santa Barbara Zen Center. And before I turn it over to him, it's kind of our practice to pay tribute to the indigenous people, wherever they may be, you on Zoom, the folks on Zoom. I know here it's the Chumash up where I live, it's the Northern Chumash, and it's the Tongva Nation down in Los Angeles. So we acknowledge and pay tribute to them, ancestors past, present, and future. They have been walking this land for thousands of years before us, and we're living in harmony with the land. We can take some lessons from that. Oh, and then after we're done with that, we'll Q&A. Okay, and that's basically when we were invited, that was going to be kind of this is more of a discussion about the shared stewardship model, and then address any questions that you have about it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm really glad to be here. I'm happy it finally happened. I think I started getting emails with people trying to schedule this back in like March or April, and there were various dates. And I always tell people like I have no life, but all of the dates were on those few days that I actually had a life. So finally, the last day available, which was today, was the day that worked. So I'm really glad to be here, and it's been lovely to be up here in Santa Barbara. And then on Wednesday, Sensei Shōgen and I are going up to a conference of the Zen teachers, and we'll be, I haven't seen him in quite a few months, and actually quite a few months. And then we'll be together for several days at probably a really boring conference. But in any event, Sensei Shōgen and I, as he said, so both of us are Dharma successors of this Roshi Wendy Egyoku Nekao. And Egyoku was really the, we'll say the creator or the articulator of this shared stewardship model. And so as he said, I'm going to go into the history of how it came about. But I'm also going to, since he has a nice outline, I'm going to upend everything and do one of the things that was supposed to be later. I want to talk about it now, because shared stewardship it's a way of organizing, a Zen group. It's the foundational principle on which the ZCLA is founded and has operated. for the last 22 or 23 years. Sometimes it's worked better than other times, and I'm happy to talk about, my view of, what it means and where it works and how it doesn't work and what it really requires. But fundamentally, the thing that's really important and that I really try to emphasize is that shared stewardship, it rests on a completely revolutionary view of how we relate to our spiritual practice. And if we don't have that shift, then it's all really kind of a waste of time. So in our culture, our culture is just, it's very kind of a consumer-based culture. And as a result, we tend to incorporate that consumer model or mindset into even our spiritual practice. So, and this was true of Zen Center, ZCLA, I'll say Zen Center, but you'll know who I'm talking about, right? ZCLA for decades. And the idea was you come in and you get your goods and then you go. So it's what I refer to as a transactional practice of spiritual practice. And so that entire model basically works from a consumer and producer mindset. So that there's this idea that, and while this was not always true for everyone at ZCLA, there were many people who said, they came in, they pay their membership fees, they come in, they see the teacher, they get the Dharma talk, and then they go home. And it was this kind of like, I'm going to give you my money and I'm going to get my goods. And that kind of a style of transactional practice was really the model for almost everywhere. And it's truly the model, and it's based on a kind of a hierarchical structure, of the organization of the enterprise, and that we're just consumers of the product. And shared stewardship fundamentally changes this. It doesn't mean that there's not a horizontal structure in the teacher-student relationship, but it means that the way we relate to the organization itself has to shift. It has to shift from an idea of a producer-consumer model to an idea of co-creation. The entire model of shared stewardship rests on an idea of co-creation, that we are together co-creating this practice. And this is why in our practice, and you'll see this actually repeated across the Tibetan practice, you see this, the Dalai Lama says this, Thich Nhat Hanh said this a lot, that the Sangha in our era has become the most important element, that the Sangha was historically so devalued. Buddha, important. Dharma, yes. Sangha, nobody really knew what to do with that. But in the shared stewardship model, it's from the Sangha that everything arises. And so it's easy to say this, and I will tell you that it's really, really hard in practice to continue and to really incorporate it into your whole way of relating to your fellow practitioners, to the organization, the so-called organization, to what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. It's also particularly hard. I'm going to jump ahead to some of my critique of the shared stewardship model, because people come in all the time. There's always new people coming in and they always need to be trained, right? It's not like it's like a one and done thing, right? People, because we all come out of a consumer mentality in this culture. And so a shared stewardship model, everyone comes in with a consumer model, and it's perfectly good, right? That's why people come in. I always say, people come to Zen centers not because they're perfectly happy in their lives, it's because they're looking for something, right? Absolutely great. It gets you in the door. And then, as I say, please leave that with your shoes outside, right? So it brings us in. And then as we sit, we develop the understanding that whatever it was that brought us here is not so important. We may get the satisfaction of whatever it was that was bothering us. I need to be happier. I need to be a better husband. I need to be less angry. I need to be less stressed. I need to, have a happier life. All these things that bring us here, we may get that as part of practice. We may not. And in the same way with shared stewardship, everyone comes in because they want the Dharma, because they may have you may have some charismatic teacher. You want the goods from the guru from the East, or whatever it may be. But once you get into, you have to have a culture that can integrate people and then really kind of train them in this complete shift in mindset. And it is hard. It requires constant work. So shared stewardship, as a model, as this shift from a consumer to a co-creation model of practice, of mindset, not just about practice, but then about our mindset about the world that we live in, how we relate to each other, that we're not just in a transactional relationship with Sensei Shōgen or with you, or whatever, that it's something that we are co-creating this life together. So integrating that into within the context of this, very, very strong current that we're kind of fighting against in our current culture requires diligent effort. And so some people are like, I just want my goods. Okay, that's fine. It's fine. I'm talking right now, and this is an issue that's come up at ZCLA, and it's going to come up at this conference we're going to. It comes up a lot, which is I refer to something as the concentric communities. So the concentric communities are, there are all sorts of different people who come to Zen organizations with different things they want. And some people just want to get the relief from the suffering. And then some people want to go deeper. And it's all good. It's not my view that, one is better than the other. And that we're only going to deal with the serious students and sort of who cares about these other dilettantes. That's not my approach at all. It's really sort of seeing that there are concentric circles of communities of people who come here. And then the question is, how do we serve them, right? But from my perspective, the fundamental way is through this shared stewardship model, because the shared stewardship model is really a recognition that we are co-creating this world together. And that is nothing more than an expression of the Buddha's recognition of the interconnection of all things, right? So this was one of the fundamental recognitions of the Buddha. I, the great earth, and all beings simultaneously awaken. So shared stewardship is just an expression of this in our day-to-day life as a temple. But it requires work. Shakyamuni Buddha didn't just order it off Amazon and get the answer. He spent hard years of practice to get that awakening and insight. And it requires us to do that too. And then to keep going, to keep deepening our understanding and working together. And working together sounds great, except that people are a pain in the ass, right? And that's why Sangha practice is so wonderful, because it's about rubbing off those sharp edges. And the only way you rub off the sharp edges is by practicing together and having the commitment to waking up together. It's the together part, right? And so that's why my teacher, we had she quotes to me regularly, she says, the great hermit lives in the city, right? So, when I was a young practitioner, I always had, and a lot of people have this, I think, from what I've heard, I had this fantasy I was going to go off and live as a hermit in the Sierras. I actually was up on the internet, actually scouting land at some point, oh, I'm going to go find this beautiful place and I'm going to live in the Sierras and screw my husband and forget this. And I'm just going to go off. And, the hermits are great. It's nice to have them. They get a developed understanding in a certain way, but they can't work with people. It's a very it's an unbalanced practice. The practice is working together in Sangha. And shared stewardship is a Sangha-based practice. You have to be able to be committed to working as a Sangha together. Now, the history of shared stewardship, I'll get back on his outline. Everyone knows there's a big scandal, Maezumi Roshi, 1980s. And then Maezumi Roshi dies in 1995. Suddenly. It was not planned. He wasn't sick for a long time. He went back to Japan. He died overnight, drowned in a hot tub. And then, chaos ensued. And at ZCLA, Roshi Bernie had been named in Maezumi Roshi's will as the second abbot. But Bernie was off in New York doing his own thing. So he named someone as the resident teacher, kind of on a trial basis, see how it goes, before naming him as the next abbot. Well, it didn't go well. All big sex scandal. Tried to work it out. He wasn't going to cooperate. He gets thrown out. But was quite a charismatic guy. So he leaves and takes half the Sangha leaves with him. So ZCLA is now in sort of complete chaos. And Bernie asked Egyoku, will you go back? And so she goes back, but she says, I'll go back, but my condition is you have to give me like free reign to do whatever I feel is needed. And he's like, God bless you. And so she comes back, and she originally says it's going to be for like either a 3-month or a 6-month basis. 2 years later, she's named as the next abbot. And then 2 years after that, she starts this shared stewardship investigation and practice. So shared stewardship came out of the fact in her mind that Zen Center was in complete free fall. Like it was in a place where anything was possible and people were willing to try anything. And she's said over the years, one of the great things about being in Southern California, in her experience, is that people in Southern California are much more open to experimentation than people in other parts of the country. And so she's deployed various sort of techniques or models, and we've done all sorts of different things that in other parts of the country may be a little too uptight to really just be willing to try. But one of them was this model of shared stewardship. Shared stewardship, it was like, basically, Zen Center didn't have a lot of money. I mean, at that point, I was somehow or other got involved with the leadership of the place, which is crazy. I mean, at one point, we knew how much money we had in the bank, but we didn't know really how we'd gotten there for the last 6 months. I mean, it was like there were no records, there was no anything. It was just kind of like, there was really no money for staff. There was no real money for anything. And so part of shared stewardship came out of a pragmatic recognition that we don't have, we have Zen Center is a relatively big organization as these things go. I don't think it's not that big, but it's pretty complicated. And it requires, there's a lot of moving parts, and there wasn't anyone to kind of like, there wasn't enough money to have a staff to kind of keep it running. And so shared stewardship at one level was designed to basically get the entire Sangha involved in the operation and management of the place. Because, and therefore to basically go from a very hierarchical model, which is the historic Japanese model, of course, to a very, to go to a very sort of horizontal model. And so in the horizontal model, the idea was people would be responsible for different things and we would trust them with it, which is, that's a lot of like letting go of control. And some people start to see in this practice that they are control freaks, and or things like that. And so that's great. I mean, again, all of this you have to do, from my perspective, within the mindset of practice. Everything gets rolled into your practice. So if you see, your anxiety, or you see your insecurity, or like, I'm responsible for this and I don't know what the hell I'm doing, or everything, you have to be willing to just roll all of that into practice. Everything has to come out of practice. Everything at Zen Center, whatever we do, from the most exalted to the most mundane, is all rooted in practice. And that is the fundamental element. The other fundamental element is you have to be willing to let it completely fail. Because if you're not willing to let it completely fail, you're not willing to actually either release enough control or just be committed enough to the model. And she said this a lot when I was on the board for many years, and Egyoku, as the abbot, was on the board, and she would just say, well, just let it go. We have to be willing to let it fail. And her attitude was, if this place fails, the practice will continue. Right? The practice is more important than the entity, than the institution. And so the practice will continue. The Dharma will continue. And so sometimes if the structure is not working, just let it go. And then we see what's going to arise out of that. And have that sort of willingness to really have that mind of investigation. So out of that, we had a lot of people who were kind of excited by this prospect, and we, a lot of different structures, or first we called them, what do we call them first? Now we call them circles, and then we called them, I can't remember, we think, words change. Anyway, we had all sorts of different things, and then over time, a lot of it went away. And in my view, I'm going to shift in a minute, but back to Sensei Shōgen, but, at the very beginning, there were probably 10 or 12 years where shared stewardship was just like the lifeblood of Zen Center. And we had, probably 15 different circles. Each of them was responsible for different things. So there was one circle that was responsible for, so we have 7 buildings. I think we have something like 15 altars. And so one group was just responsible for the altar flowers. And one group is responsible for cleaning the altar, the altars. And one group is responsible for new members and taking care of new members. We had one group that was the healthcare circle that sort of helped support people who had health issues. And then we had one group, which was the executive circle. We didn't have an executive director, so they sort of worked together on that. And then, of course, there was most importantly the Tenzo circle, was responsible for making sure we were fed. They were most important. And, all these different circles. And then over time, things start to fall apart because, in my view, there wasn't the consistent, we had this incredible, so shared stewardship started with a huge number of classes, and our training text was Dogen Zenji's Tenzo Kyogen, which was the instructions to the Zen cook, or instructions to the Tenzo. And we used that as our training manual for how to take care of each other and how to take care of a Zen temple. And as I said, so the first few years, so we did a lot of classes, we did all this stuff about, getting everyone on the same page about the finances of Zen Center, the structure of Zen Center, the history of Zen Center, all that stuff, so that everybody kind of had a starting point. And then we all studied the Tenzo Kyogen together for a couple of years. We go slow in our studies. And then and all the time, we're just running this place and having lives as outside of it. And then over the course of time, the classes stop, people keep coming, they keep hearing about shared stewardship, but there's no training in it. And so it gets kind of dissipated. And then, so I thought it had a good run for 10 or 12 years, and things have continued, but I feel like my personal feeling is it's fallen away. So earlier this year, I've started a new series of shared stewardship classes to basically reinvigorate and revive the model.
It's based very closely on what we did.
It was based, I believe in stealing rather than inventing if I can. And so, because I'm a naturally lazy person, and you have to know yourself. And so, but the shared stewardship model, again, it rests on this. And so I think over the course of time, and I'll say in particularly in the pandemic where everything went into a Zoom model, I think that the transactional mindset got really strongly reintroduced, because people are like watching on Zoom and they can't even come, much less there's some work that's being done. The board met like weekly. The board of directors met like every single week on Zoom during the pandemic, and various other groups were meeting very regularly. But it's very easy with a Zoom model to be like very transactional in your mindset. And so now that we're post-pandemic, although I had COVID 3 weeks ago, we're kind of really working in redeveloping away from the transactional model back into the co-creating model. But as I said, and it's our experience, we have to it's a constant training. It's not a one and done. You have new people and they hear shared stewardship and they hear it and they have no idea what it means. It's like our Zen training. It's like the way we get instructed on how we sit. When someone new comes, we have to train them in how to sit. And with the shared stewardship model, it's the same thing. I've talked too much. So Sensei Shōgen.
Well, we're going to do this piece together. but wanted to go over some of the components of shared stewardship. You know, what is that? What does it mean? And Chodo, if you would pass, I don't have enough for everybody. We can share.
Sure.
But this is the mandala. And I don't know how many of you, I don't know, Sensei Koan, did he introduce the Gate of Sweet Nectar? Or any of you familiar with that? It's one that we used to do every Sunday at ZCLA. And this is basically,
We do every Sunday.
we're back doing that. Yeah.
I know.
And so if the Gate of Sweet Nectar speaks to these 5 wisdom families, and you may be familiar with some of this, but you may not. So there are these 5 circles, and they are definitely intermingled, right? They cross into each other. So that in the center is what we call the Buddhist sphere, and the green up on top, social action, which is the karma energy. The education and study, that's the Vajra energy. See clearly. Resources, the Ratna energy. Take care. And I can't even read the other. What's that? The integration, which is like relational, right? And that's the Padma energy. So this is kind of the schematically, this is kind of, you know, what we look at ZCLA. And in the courses, Sensei Dharma-Joy was talking about things that, you know, things come and go. Groups, circles come and go. We used to have a really strong, for example, prison group that was very, very active in the prisons in Southern California. That's just kind of gone away. I still have a group, of course, up in San Luis Obispo, but that's kind of, you know, gone away. We had a strong Kenzo circle that went away. Now it's coming back up. So the idea is that it's a process. It's nothing that is cast in stone. So in these realms, for example, you'll see in the center, that's kind of the teacher realm. So the abbot would be there, and the relationship side of things. We have a lot of affiliated sanghas with ZCLA. My little group in San Luis Obispo is an affiliated sitting group. Residence circle. So you can kind of get the gist of this. So the resources down at the bottom, the Ratna energy, board of directors is down there. We have executive circles. We're connected with the White Plum Sangha, the study sphere. So that's the curriculum that, you know, kind of develops all the programs at ZCLA. Head trainee program, and this is from 2012, when we were kind of really actively involved with this, as Sensei was saying. Priest training circle, study program. So we have sutra, or not sutra, but just text study. We have a group at ZCLA that meets. We've got one up in San Luis Obispo. So these are all the components of this model. And if you'd like to say, before you do, kind of thinking about what you said about Sangha, that how important it is. And I know Thich Nhat Hanh thinks that the future Maitreya Buddha is the Sangha. Right. And isn't that something? Yeah. And then talk about, the other thing that came up was lotus in muddy water, right? And one of the students up in San Luis Obispo, Bukuan, she talks about the pearl in a pile of shit, and which is, I think, a little bit more graphic. Did you want to elaborate?
I just want to say quickly about this. So you have an empty one there. I guess you're going to send. So these 5 Buddha, these are referred to as the 5 Buddha wisdom energies. And the point is that we each have all of these energies within us, right? These are not, it's not like, oh, you're just, but each of us is going to have, each of us will have some resonance more with some than others, you know. All of us have all of them in the same way that we all the bodhisattvas are all energies that we are connected to. So all of these are energies within ourselves, and here it's basically expressed as an organizational principle of the organization, so that you can to try to sort of clarify we have these 5 different spheres, and then we try to sort of categorize, which group is going to fit in which one, understanding that all of them really interpenetrate each other. So it's a good technique, it's a good organizing principle, but as with all of these things, don't take it too seriously.
And some things came out of this process in Roshi Gyoku, and one was this idea of collective wisdom. As Sensei was talking about, well, we're not hermits as much as some of us would like to be in the Sierras or where I live in San Luis Obispo. We're all in this together, right? And so that became one of the kind of buzzwords, the collective wisdom and collective awakening. We did something just as mundane as, in the Soto tradition. If you go, for example, the San Francisco Zen Center, they face the wall. That's the Soto tradition. Rinzai face out. Well, we used to, historically, we would sit the first period and the last period, like during Sesshin, facing out, like Rinzai style, and then the rest of the time we would face the wall. Roshi Gyoku said, hey, this isn't just about me, myself, and I. This is about all of us. So we now sit facing out, and it makes a big difference, don't you think? Over the years. Another really important component of this has been counsel, and I think you guys have been involved with some counsel training and doing counsel, and that's a really, really important piece. And it's a way that it doesn't answer questions. It's really my take on the whole shared stewardship model is that every voice is heard. The abbot still
And valued.
And when Roshi Gyoku was there, the realization was, well, it was like vertical, like Roshi or Sensei was talking about, going to a more horizontal program. Well, she would still, when push came to shove, she would make the final call, but she took the time to listen to everybody before she made that final call. And I know we want to get this open as soon as possible to question and answers, and we're already getting a little bit short on time. Anything about like doing this with a larger group?
I would just say the one thing that's on my list as one of the important components of understanding that when you distribute responsibility is that it requires a commitment to communication. I used to basically say in the shared stewardship model, there's 50% doing and 50% telling people what you've been doing. Because it's not that everybody, shared stewardship didn't mean that it was like everybody gets a vote on everything. It's really about trusting people to do things. But because it can be if there are a lot of things going on, people really want to know what's going on. They don't necessarily need to, vote on it, but it's good to sort of, so the shared stewardship model rests fundamentally on good communication. Otherwise, it just becomes kind of chaos. That's what I'm just saying.
So I'm going to open it up. I've got a little spiel about doing this in a small Sangha, but maybe that'll come out in the Q&A time. So we'll open it up.
That's my question. How do you do it? I mean, when you have 12 people or 10 people, well, I guess, how do you do it, and what priorities would you give?
Well, in our group, we've got 5 people on the board of directors, and those are the same 5 people that kind of are really, really involved heavily. If we get, we have a Thursday or a Sunday, if we have 10 people, that's a big deal, right? So it's really quite small, but we've all taken on the various responsibilities, and we're using this model. So, for example, in the karma sphere, the service sphere, we've got like food bank donations. The prison project is a part of that. The study, the Vajra sphere, we have a head trainee program. So we have somebody that's a head trainee for a year and then has the Hosen that most of you are familiar with that at the culmination of their year. study programs. So we do various studies both on Thursday evenings. We meet in person Thursday evening and Sunday mornings. And the Buddhist sphere, so that's as a guiding teacher, that's kind of my sphere with curriculum development, but I have a circle, a program circle that helps me with that. That's just 2 other people. And I talked about the resources section with the board of directors, so that's 5 of us that are on that. So it's everybody's kind of picking these things up, you know, and just because of the, I think their love of the Dharma, and they want us to succeed and have a center that we can continue to reach out to share the Dharma. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's like, yeah, people just step in, and it's, in my experience, it's been quite wonderful about how serious they are and how much time they're willing to devote.
I think the real challenge in small groups is the danger of burnout. Because, and that's part of what the shared stewardship model was designed to address. But it does require a certain critical mass of bodies, to be honest. You know, I mean, if it's basically, if you're talking about 3 people, you know, it's, you know, according to Shakyamuni Buddha, 3 people is enough to create a Sangha. But, you know, I mean, it's, there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot to do, and if it's always the same 3 people, it just ends up being burnout. But part of the shared stewardship model requires there being enough people to really to distribute some of the responsibility to. Now, the advantage of it is that from as I hopefully tried to convey, it's a really exciting way of relating to our practice. You know, where it isn't like, oh, they're doing the work and I'm just going to show up. But it does require buy-in from a certain number of people in order to basically hand out some of the work. If you can get that, it's a wonderful and exciting and sort of challenging, absolutely, way of sort of doing things. But if you don't, it's just really hard. That's why, you know, I mean, that's why I say you also have to be willing to let things fail, because, you know, we don't want this, the Dharma is not about grinding people into the ground.
So as he said, the buy-in is just really so important, and yeah, and spreading it out. So it's not just, and we've just got, like I said, the core of 5 people that do a lot of the work. Now there are others, you know, we've got maybe 25 people on our email list. Actually 86 on our MailChimp list, most of whom I don't even know. I don't know who they are.
I'm on it 3 times, just so it gets
but yeah, the buy-in thing is just so key. And yeah, there's a real chance of burnout. And so you really have to model that on how much people are doing. And it just made me think, for 20 years, because we've had the Sangha up there for I think 23 years. And for most of those years, I was practicing down at ZCLA. So all we had was a Thursday evening group for years. And then,
so it's just to clarify what he just said. So every weekend, Sensei Shōgen would drive from San Luis Obispo to LA and be there for the weekend to train with our teacher and then go back.
Yeah.
So that he did that for 20 years. And then finally we got a restraining order.
so this is, in a sense, some of this is new. It was actually the pandemic that really catapulted us.
Yeah.
And yes, it's transactional, but it also allowed us to go, we have offerings 7 days a week now. Now, some of them are just on Zoom, early morning sit, 6 to 7 in the morning, but we're meeting in person on Thursday evenings and Sunday mornings now. And we've got a whole cadre now of people that have been head trainees, and they're offering Dharma talks. So we're on kind of a rotational basis. So I'm not having to do talks like every week. Some teachers do that, but we rotate. There's 4 of us right now that are rotating that. And we have, because some of the group members, they wanted to have a study group. So we now have a study group. We're reading Vasubandhu, one of his works. And they're meeting on Tuesday evenings, Zoom only. But so it's grown. So in a sense, we're still kind of new at this as it evolves. And Kanjo, one of our members, was just saying, wow, we used to just sit on Thursday evenings, like what happened? We've got all this other stuff going. So there's a lot of really good energy. Yeah. I don't know if that answered it.
Just a few things. First, I think this model would have been perfect several years ago when we were up at McVeigh, and there was a vibrant, ongoing community and practice, and of course, Sensei Cohen is our anchor, and there was a dynamism where not only were we sitting together every Sunday, but we would have 1 and 2 day retreats and sashins, and so there was an active community. Right now, we are a disparate group of people. We meet once every 2 weeks, and very, very strong, independent lives. And my issue is over the last several months has been to even get a coffee with one of our community members. So, there's a present reality.
Absolutely.
That, just the basic coming together.
Right.
And then, so that's the first challenge. And the second that came to my mind was I was sitting when Maizumi Roshi, on that particular day, when he just let it all out, he confessed everything. And what I saw then was that he was trapped in that hierarchical model. And there was no way for him to get the kind of peer support, therapeutic support that he so needed. He had nowhere to go. And I've seen that of other teachers within that hierarchical model. And basically, he was saying, I too much responsibility.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I burned out.
Yeah.
And so the stewardship model, the peer model is very superior, but it needs a vibrant community.
Yeah.
And that's the last part of it is that that when I first started practice, and many of the others here, that we were all in our 20s and 30s. And the world was our oyster. We were going to transform it. Now we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm going to be turning 80 soon. So it's a different dynamic. So.
Well, let me just say, this practice is about transforming ourselves first. And this is why I actually started with the point about shared stewardship rests on this shift in our thinking about spiritual practice, because how we start to relate to spiritual practice, and if we can make that shift in ourselves, all of this stuff, in my opinion, I mean, it's great. I mean, it's nice. It's, someday they'll teach it in business schools or something. But the most important part is the internal shift. And that, I think, doesn't necessarily involve anyone else.
Yeah. And yet there's just one last thing. I think a lot of us were, coming into practice, engaged in what I call magical thinking.
Yeah.
The world is now transformed.
Yeah. How'd that work out?
And if it's not transformed, none of this is real. So and so it negates Sangha and Dharma. what is our
What
purpose?
does? what
That
makes it?
particular,
Mindset.
the me
Yeah.
kind of practice.
Yeah.
Which in an individualistic society, you know, just like transactional, it suits us very well.
That's right. That's why I said this isn't, you know, as they used to say, I mean, I'm gay, but this practice is not for sissies, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, it's hard work.
So,
We're terrible marketers. Like, we're like, okay, we're gonna sit here and we're gonna face a wall, and we're gonna do nothing and just see what comes up. And that's it.
this is it.
And that's not it.
Right.
And we're gonna save all sentient beings as a side.
Yeah, right.
If I could add something, first thing, I want to thank you both for today. If I'm coming away with one word, it's exciting. So thank you. But, you know, I was the guy who wanted to be the hermit too, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and I asked Doug when he was our priest, he was coming down once a month from Santa Cruz. And I said, where's my mountain monastery now? And then he said, where is it not? And so that shook me up and straightened me out. But, you know, part of the joke here is, I call it the Santa Barbara, where is the center? We don't have a temple. We don't even have a room.
Right.
Thankfully, the hospice gives us this for free, but once a month, but you know, how are we gonna recruit another priest when Koan Sensei is gone? So, you know, how do we bring somebody up from LA once a month? How do we do anything? Our board of directors, except for Michael, the five of them, I don't think members here can even name our board of directors, and none of them live here.
Yeah.
Now, they do keep the website going, but you know, it's like, and they don't attend. So we don't even have that core. So,
Right.
so we're looking for it, but I think when we do our social meetings, at Lisa's house and at Michael's house, the core is there. The spark is still lit. So, I have hope.
And it'll be up to you to do.
Yeah.
Are you gonna maintain or continue to be a Zen center? What direction do you guys want to go? I mean, you're gonna have to explore that and ask those questions.
And if it fails, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, Roshi Yoku got this from, she tells this story. She was heading up the administrative side of things. It was a mess. The finances it was just god awful. And so this was being expressed to Roshi Yoku, or Maizumi. And he said, hey, Yoku, let it go. If it's gonna dissolve, let it dissolve. It's okay.
Yeah, we had a saying at work, come to work every day prepared to be fired.
Yeah. That's how she-
And with that attitude, we got things done. But you can get a lot done if you don't need to take credit. But
Well,
with this attitude of let it fail, you know,
and there are other models out there. I've
Yeah.
talked to a few people, in our area, there's the White Heron Sangha, and they have like 250 members. Now they get maybe 25 to 30 at their main meeting on a Sunday evening. But this is a group that's comprised of folks from different traditions. So there's some Zen folks in there, certainly. But there's Theravadan, Tibetan, and they are volunteer only. And they invite teachers in. They don't have a teacher that's a full-time teacher there. So they invite people. And I cannot believe the Zen rocks or the Buddhist rock stars that they're able to get and bring in for, they don't have residential retreats, but they'll do 3-4 day retreats, over weekends, long weekends. And it's a successful model. So that's out there as well. And then maybe that's Zen in the West now, where we're blending, who knows?
The one thing I'll say, I do actually believe, so as I was sitting this morning, I know we're probably out of time, but for me, I'm the fifth abbot of ZCLA. ZCLA, I'm incredibly privileged. I mean, I'm privileged in all sorts of other ways, but I'm incredibly privileged because I, became the abbot of a place. We have 7 buildings. We have 25 residential students. I've got a staff of 6 or 7 or whatever, and so it's a very fortunate place. But most of Zen in America looks like this, right? Like you are the beating heart of Zen in America. And that for me is exciting, right? Because there's so much creative potential here. And I really encourage you to connect with that. Now, the one thing I'll say is, I don't know anything about the White Heron Sangha, except I go on a ringer every time he has his head trainee ceremony. But I do encourage you, if you're a serious practitioner, to really work closely with a teacher. And if you're not working closely with a teacher, really try to. And I'll say at ZCLA, we have 4 teachers. We all 4 of us see people on through Zoom every single week. And we do not restrict it to, you can be a member or non-member. And so if people are interested in studying with a teacher, and I just encourage you, if you're interested in deepening your practice on doing so, just email me and I'll connect you to the right people to get the list, so that you just sign up on the Google Sheet for a link and you can see a teacher. My email is very easy. It's dharma-joy@zcla.org. And if you're interested, I just encourage you to just work with a teacher and just really commit to your practice and find, if this container works for your practice, that's great. And if it doesn't work for your practice, that's great too. And it's just about clarifying and just really clarifying for ourselves. This whole practice your whole life is investigation. It's all investigation. And so, when it's like whatever comes up, that's interesting. So my teacher, like, her stock phrase is, "Oh, isn't that interesting?" Like, it's a great way to move through life. Oh, isn't that interesting? It's not good, it's not bad, it's interesting. Like, how do we work with this? Whatever's coming up, like, it's like her partner is a scientist, so it's a very scientific method. It's like, oh, I'm just interested in, I am the experiment, and I am the results.
Inquiry.
Yeah.
Curiosity.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in because I identified my role as keeping the trains
Oh,
on
yeah,
time.
that's right.
And our train has left the station.
the station.
And I want to thank you very, very much for coming up and joining
Mhm.
us today. This was extremely helpful, and really learned a lot from it. So thank
Okay.
you for that. Thank all of you for being with us today and sitting together. It's always feels better sitting with people, Sangha, than it feels feels good sitting at home, but it feels really good to sit with people. Bob, do you want
To be
to
continued.
Yeah.
To be continued.
In the meantime, page 41.
Yeah, before that, I don't.
And then we could do announcements at the end, unless, is this an announcement
Yeah,
or a
well,
commentary?
I think it's got announcement commentary.
Quick, please.
Yes, of course. I was with Cohen last week, and he was conversational. He's still very difficult to find the words, but in our conversation he was very, very much curious and concerned about the health and well-being of our community. And I intend to see him again today. And if there's anyone who is able to and would like to join me.
I try to come down like once a month, but his cognitive skills are better than they've been in a year.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you.
So we'll do the 4 Bodhisattva vows 3 times, English, Japanese, and English.
Well, we don't have chin cards.
You can just mumble.
Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to attain it. Shujo Mugen Seigan Do. Goro Jin Seigan Dan. Homan Buryo Seigan Gaku. Butsudo Bujo Seigan Jo. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them. Desires are inexhaustible.
I vow to put an end to them. The dharmas are boundless. I vow to master them. The Buddha is unsurpassable. I vow to attain.
All right, we'll clean up in just a second. Any announcements though, before we, get this room back together?
I seem to be quite verbal this today. I came upon a truism today that I believe is going to transform my life, and I think the same with you. And it is that did you know that stress spelled backwards is desserts?
The coffee man speaks.
Yeah. Anyway,
One gets
I
rid
think-
of the other.
I thought that was clever.
Thank you for bringing the verbal cookies.
Yeah.
Joy.
Exactly.
Just a reminder, as a Zen Center, which we still are, at least organizationally and legally, we exist through donations and dana, and very important in Zen practice, this idea of giving yourself, sharing the Dharma, and sharing your resources to support this enterprise. So you can go old school, there's a couple baskets over there. You can leave Dharma for, or Dana for our teachers or for our Zen Center. Or you could do it online, and there's instructions on our website at the Dharma. Yeah.
And if you don't want to zoom down to ZCLA, you like San Luis Obispo better, I'm up there.
I'm a little recruiting. I like that. Yeah.
So we're halfway, we've met. I refer to him as the barbarian from the north, and so we've met halfway here, so.
Are you still sitting at the same place?
Well, likewise, we have, no, Thursday evening, we're at Crow's End, so we don't have our own temple either.
Wow.
So we have Thursday evenings at Crow's End, and then the White Heron Sangha space that place that I mentioned, we meet there Sunday mornings.
Thank you so
If you could take the Zato and Zabuton and stack them outside the closet in the hallway. We put the boxes in first, and then we put those in. So out in the hallway, like next to the closet.
So I failed to ask you who your teacher was, because when on the third dedication, I usually dedicate to the teacher of the tradition.
Right.
But I had not asked you, so I didn't, so I just went. So I thought, am I right? But I didn't, so I just went with our sense.
Yeah.
Go ahead.